whether or not the Mass is a propitiatory sacrifice. And you will find in a Protestant country like the US, hot debate on that. If you were to jump in a time machine and go back right before the dawn of the Reformation, you would find no debate on that. Everyone knew that the Mass was a propitiatory sacrifice, and you don't have to take my words for it. Martin Luther tells us as much. He complained in The Bondage of the Will that there is no opinion more generally held or more firmly believed in the church today than this, that the Mass is a good work and a sacrifice. John Calvin complained that Satan must have not only obscured and perverted, but altogether obliterated and abolished, vanished away and disappeared from the memory of man, the original Lord's Supper, when with most pestilential error, he blinded almost the whole world into the belief that the Mass was a sacrifice and oblation for obtaining the remission of sins. At the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, the whole Christian world is united, and the Reformers acknowledge this. Their argument is everybody on earth is worshiping God wrong. And if that argument doesn't sound a little wild to you, it should. If somebody came along today and said, everybody on earth is worshiping God wrong, I'm going to give you a new way, red flags, right? Well, this is how it was when you go back to the 16th century. Their argument is that Jesus created the Lord's Supper, and Satan somehow both abolished the work of Jesus in the Lord's Supper and somehow made all Christians forget about it, and somehow made all of the historical record of us ever worshiping God a different way disappear. That's pretty incredible. And it wasn't just that, there were some ignorant Catholics in the 16th century. No. Calvin is actually quite explicit that the expiatory or propitiatory nature of the sacrifice of the Mass is not merely the common opinion of the vulgar, meaning like ordinary people, but the very act has been so arranged as to be a kind of propitiation by which satisfaction is made to God for the living and the dead. The Catholic view of the Mass is built into the nature of the Mass itself. Martin Luther agreed with this. He pointed out that the very words of the Mass speak in unmistakable terms of the sacrificial nature of the Mass at the altar. But then he admits we can add to this the sayings of the Holy Fathers, he means the early Christians, the great number of examples and the widespread practice uniformly observed throughout the world. I think it's important to start here because it's easy for apologists to quote some theologian or church father out of context, and you don't necessarily know if that quotation is a fair representation of their beliefs or whether those beliefs were the norm or the exception. But here the Reformers are telling you that the expiatory nature of the sacrifice of the Mass, the propitiatory nature, was the universal opinion of the church everywhere by theologians and laity alike, found all over the world, found as far back as we can go, and that this is what Christians were praying in their worship every week all across the church. So when they tell you that, believe them.